Okay, hi friends. I have had some very good, interesting, constructive conversations about inspiration and best practices in terms of that. I wanted to share everything that I have learned. This is in part to just be accountable for myself, my own actions, to educate other people, and just to start this conversation about inspiration and what best practices of that look like. I think a good place to start is just discussing my creative process as an artist and what that looks like and how I'm hoping to adjust that in the future moving forward. So every kind of creative project for me, whether it's a painting or a collection, I always create somewhat of a mood board, and that basically just helps me make sense of kind of the idea that I have in my head, and visualize that a little bit more, and then hopefully land on a conclusion to move forward with, to actually put paint to canvas. So there's a few things about that process which are totally fine, and then there's a few outcomes of that process that are definitely stepping in a gray area, and that's what I want to talk about. So I'm going to use my coffee collection that I just painted to kind of provide examples of everything that I want to talk about. So let's start with this guy. On the left was the inspiration, on the right is my painting. So this one is obviously a rendition or a replication of a vintage sign. At this point moving forward, I will never do something like this again. Picture on the left, I am assuming is open copyright. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on a t-shirt, you can buy it on a magnet, you can buy it on Alibaba, you can buy it on all of these different stores if you reverse Google image search that one. So in terms of copyright, if it's open copyright, great. But yeah, safe to say that for me, this coffee collection was just about trying new styles, trying different things. And that's why in my head, I wanted to do this. This was color blocking. It was vintage, and I liked the vibe, and I got this new projector that I wanted to try. So for me, that was this whole collection was quite experimental. If you take a look at all of the pieces within it, most of them are really quite different from each other. We can move on to another more sensitive piece in my collection, which is this one. So this is the original, it's a digital illustration. And then this is my painting on the right. Obviously me taking those figures and creating a painting out of it. Now, looking at these side by side, yes, very similar. So this was removed from the collection, and I did get in contact with the artist. I had a very lovely response from her, which is comforting, because this is obviously a sensitive topic, and there's always the potential that the artist is not gonna receive something like that well. I basically reached out to her and said, hey, look, I was trying new things. I obviously, there's this line between copying and inspiration. Nonetheless, this piece that I've created has been marked as a study. It's been taken out of the collection, and I'm gonna send it to her. I think it's an artist out of Brazil. Her name's Jennifer Prince. She's super talented. And she was so lovely in her email. She just said, I totally understand where you're coming from. Please don't worry about it. I appreciate you reaching out, that kind of thing. Ask for permission rather than forgiveness. It's always an easier email to send. And if they say no, they say no, and you find a different inspiration. So I think that is something I want to touch on too, is having these conversations with artists. I just feel like a lot of people don't talk about it, or they have such a harsh view about it when you do hear about it, and then that's why it's kind of scary to talk about. So that's why I want to have this conversation, to be transparent about my artistic process, and hopefully help other self-taught artists shape their artistic process, just to avoid any sticky situations. The last example I want to give from my coffee collection, this was my favorite from the collection, Coffee in Italy. This is my little Italian coffee man. Obviously you can see at the top left, that's the photo, the background photo. It's a street in Genoa, Italy. And then the hand that's coming out of the window is that's like a snippet from a big picture that I used. And then same with my little coffee man, a little snippet from another big picture that I used, and stitching them all together to create something that's original. So in terms of like my creative process and how I'm going to be adjusting that, I've had a lot of conversations with awesome artists in my community that have been really helpful in like sharing with me what their artistic process looks like, because I think that does look different for every artist, and so that's something that I'm definitely ready to learn and willing to learn, is like, what does that look like for other people, and how can I adjust my creative process to avoid anything like this in the future. Number one recommendation is use your own photography as much as possible. Sourcing open copyright images, or getting in contact with the photographer, getting savvy with Photoshop. So like you photoshopping basically your own kind of reference photo. Your reference photo is an original piece of work before you even start painting it, if that makes sense. To kind of like do a quick overview, best practices that I have found in my research for in terms of copyright. Number one, avoid it at all costs if you possibly can. That gray area sucks. That conversation sucks. Number two, mark it as a study. So that's like obviously what ended up happening with a few pieces in that collection. And the last one is ask for permission rather than forgiveness. So again, like it's just a shitty conversation to have with an artist as well that's inspired you. Like I said, you don't know how they're gonna react. Thankfully in this case it was very positive, but there's always just, you're leaving an opportunity for something to go sideways. Last thing that I want to add, I am not an expert. I am committed to learning. I'm committed to that process and whatever that looks like. My intentions of sharing this is just like to offer transparency and honesty behind like the scenes of my art and what that creative process looks like. And also to open the floor to any comments or suggestions from other artists, other vendors, other like lawyers. If anyone has any advice or comments on what a successful creative process looks like and best practices in terms of copyright and inspiration, love it. Super open to those. So yeah, that's that. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Have a wonderful day.